Reading from the Gospel of Mark. Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father and the holy angels." The Gospel of the Lord. How many friends do you have on Facebook? How many people affirm whatever it is that makes you, you? It's said that the more diverse the sources that confirm a story, the more likely is that story is to be true. I find this quite interesting when it applies to religion and mythology. Certain things always crop up. Every mythology has an underworld. Every mythology has a great serpent and a great flood. And every mythology speaks of a tree of life. The tree of life produces fruit that allows a human to live forever. In fact, eating the fruit gives a person so much life and wisdom and beauty that they become a god. In Greek mythology, the tree is found in a garden where its golden apples of immortality are guarded by a monstrous, multi-headed serpent. The Vikings also spoke of apples of immortality that were tended by a goddess and kept the gods of Asgard young and healthy forever. Maybe that explains Minnesota. The Irish sang of 3 brothers who turned themselves into eagles to steal apples of immortality from a sacred garden. On and on the stories go in cultures that certainly never had any contact with each other, and yet their stories are the same. The rishis of ancient Egypt, of ancient India, Gilgamesh of ancient Sumeria, Osiris in Egypt. Always the same tale, the same quest. If a person can eat the fruit of the tree of life, they will become like a god. There is, of course, a tree of life in the Bible. In Genesis, God plants the Garden of Eden and brings the man there to tend it. Adam is unique among the creation, for he is both worldly and heavenly, formed from the earth to tend the earth, but endowed with the breath and the life of God. In Eden, there are 2 special trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The man and the woman are free to enjoy all the delights of the garden, but are warned to stay away from the tree of knowledge. For on the day they eat of the fruit of that tree, God tells them they will surely die. The story is common knowledge. With a little encouragement from the snake, our first parents taste the fruit in order to be like God. That is, to decide good and evil for themselves. Because of this fatal choice, the man and the woman are banished from Eden, cut off from the tree of life. But even as they leave, they are not abandoned. God goes with them out of Eden, out into the wilderness of a broken world. Two interesting things about those trees. Humans are not immortal, but because they ate of the tree of life, Adam and Eve had extremely long lifespans. As the story continues, each ensuing generation dies at a younger age. But it's that tree of knowledge that's the real kicker, isn't it? Would God, in effect, put a poison tree in the middle of God's perfect creation? Was it a test? Was it a trap? Did God set Adam and Eve up for failure? It might look that way from first reading, but the God we know is neither a trickster nor a sadist. Rather, the God we know is love. And love is what the tree of knowledge represents. Any cage, no matter how gilded, is still a cage as long as it remains locked. In order for Adam and Eve to be in a loving relationship with God, they have to have a way out of that relationship. True love cannot be forced. It must be freely chosen and freely reciprocated. In eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve choose to judge good and evil for themselves. In short, they choose to be their own gods rather than trusting in the true God. Our God did not want us to eat this fruit, thus breaking the once perfect harmony shared between God, humans, and creation. But we had to have the option. We had to be allowed to choose. For that is the nature of love. And that choice cuts us off from the tree of life because God Himself is our life. To reject God as our God is like a flower rejecting the sun. When we refuse true love, we refuse true life as well. Thus, we have been wandering ever since, trying to get ourselves back to the garden. And God has been right there with us, for the same love that cannot force us also cannot give us up. The entire Bible is the story of God inviting, leading, coaxing, pleading, seducing us to come back home, back to God, back to life. And the story climaxes in Jesus. Jesus is God's ultimate act of love. Jesus is God made flesh, God with us. Jesus is God come down to earth, down here with us in the mud and the blood. God gives us everything He has and everything He is, even going so far as to pour out His life for us on the cross. for the very people who murdered him. Jesus is God with us, who comes to us even when we cannot turn ourselves back to him. And so it is in Jesus we have regained the tree of life. The cross was designed by man to be an instrument of humiliation, torture, and death. But God has embraced the cross, perished on it, and thus transformed it, claiming it as his own. The cross is for us the tree of life, and hanging from that tree is the strangest of fruits, the crucified body and blood of our Lord. When we eat of that fruit, when we taste for ourselves Jesus' own body and blood given for us, we are filled with life and wisdom and beauty. We are freed from death, restored to the life that God first wanted for us. The cross is the tree of life, and Christ is the fruit of that tree. Our ancient quest has ended. Christ has brought us home, and we are immortal once again. Thanks be to God.